Howdy, and welcome to Types of Pesticides. So what is a pesticide? What do you think of when you hear the word pesticide? Most people associate the term with a chemical that's used on a food plant or in food production to kill insects, but that's not always true. In reality, a pesticide is any chemical which is used by man to control any pests. These pests can include insects, plants diseases, fungus, weeds, nematodes, snails, slugs, etc. So what are insecticides? Chemicals that kill insects. And there are two types of insecticides we're going to discuss, broad spectrum and narrow spectrum. It's also important for you to know the difference between short-term and residual insecticides. Now, you shouldn't confuse the term insecticide with pesticide. A very important distinction to make before using any pesticide is to know if it's systemic or not. Systemic insecticides are those insecticides that are taken up by the plant and then any insect that's feeding on the plant ingests the chemical and dies. Broad-spectrum insecticides kill only a few types of insects and are the most commonly used insecticides because they're general-purpose killers. They're commonly used when several types of insects are a problem, especially in structural pest management. Narrow-spectrum insecticides are very selective. Examples of these are chitin synthesis inhibitors and growth regulators. Chitin inhibitors only affect animals with chitin in their exoskeleton, for example, insects and crustaceans. Growth regulators are even more specific. They affect certain groups of species that have a particular hormone in their body. Short-term insecticides are best when the insects are not going to return to the area and when long-term exposure could potentially injure non-target plants or animals. We often use these types of products for quick knockdown or flushing. Residual insecticides remain active for long periods of time and are useful when there's a persistent insect problem. One of the downfalls is that environmental or health hazards must be considered because these products hang around for so long. Pheromones are the most restrictive type of insecticides because they only work on one particular species or even sometimes one sex of a particular species. For example, the males only. In nature, pheromones are chemicals that are produced by animals to use as signals, and synthetic pheromones mimic these natural chemicals and can be used to control these pest animals. There are three types of pheromones used for control. The first are aggregation pheromones. These attract many individuals together, and this is why you often see pests clumped together. Sex pheromones attract one sex of a species to the other. For example, a female might produce a sex pheromone that the male receives and is then attracted to the female. Trail pheromones are deposited by walking insects, most commonly associated with ants, so that others can follow. This is when you see ants following one behind another. Now we're going to discuss specific types of pesticides. The first are miticides and acaricides. These are chemicals used to control mites and ticks, and they usually must come in contact with the mites or ticks to be effective. These are very similar in action to insecticides and can often be used on insects and mites. Next is fungicides. These are chemicals used to control fungus, which usually causes mold, rots, or sometimes plant diseases. All fungicides work by coming into contact with the fungus because fungi can't swallow or walk across an area. And there are two types, protectants and eradicants. Protectants prevent disease from occurring, and eradicants cure disease or a fungal problem that currently exists. Herbicides are pesticides that are used to control unwanted plants. These chemicals are a bit different from other pesticides because they're used to slow the growth of plants rather than protect them. Some herbicides kill all plants while others control only certain ones. We call this selective versus non-selective. The timing of an herbicide application is very important. In order to get the job done effectively without hurting desirable plants, you have to apply it at the appropriate time. The directions on the label will tell you when to apply the herbicide for best results. Pre-plant herbicide applications are used before the desirable plant has been planted and before the weeds have emerged. Pre-emergent herbicides are used before the weeds actually emerge, but the crop or plant or other desirable plant may have already been planted. Post-emergent applications are used after the crop, plant, or desirable plant has been planted and the weeds have already emerged. This is the most common type of herbicide application. Rodenticides are chemicals used to control rats, mice, bats, and other rodents. Other products that are used to control mammals and birds or fish can also be lumped into this category. Most rodenticides or stomach poisons are usually applied as some type of bait material. Rodenticides should be used carefully because they can pose a hazard to domestic animals or other desirable wildlife, and they are usually applied in limited areas such as known feeding places, runways, or other areas of known activity. Avicides are pesticides designed to control birds. Some avicides cause birds to have distress reactions and flop around and scare the rest of the flock. Other avicides actually kill the birds or maybe sterilize them. Nematicides are chemicals that control nematodes. Nematodes are microscopic, tiny worm-like creatures that live in the soil and sometimes feed on plant roots. Molluscicides control snails and slugs, and usually these products must be consumed by the snails or the slugs to be effective. Baits are the most commonly used molluscicides. Growth regulators and harvest aids are pesticides used to regulate the normal growth of plant tissue. They can either speed up or slow plant growth as needed. Harvest aids such as defoliants and desiccants can cause the leaves of the plant to drop off but doesn't actually kill the plant. Desiccants actually draw moisture from the plant. All of these are used to help harvest crops produced by these plants. A repellent is a pesticide that makes a site unattractive to a target pest. Repellents can come in many forms, from aerosols to dusts to products applied to clothing or skin. They can affect the senses of the pest, such as taste, smell, or touch. Be sure you understand how the pesticide you're using works and what pest it's designed to control before you apply it. It'll be most effective that way. Thanks for watching.